regarded as public enemy number one, it's horrible. Life is fragile. To take a wrong step in life, you see it time after time after time. Again, not talking about the common criminal that goes and mugs someone, but someone that's well-educated. I consider myself a fairly intelligent person, and look where I find myself. I'm not the first businessman to get in trouble, and I certainly won't be the last. It happens, and you justify it by, well, it's who am I hurting? Who am I really hurting? Again, I'm not a rapist. We don't mug people. We don't hurt people. I don't steal from people. But in of itself, there's still a crime was committed, and you need to pay my debt back to society.
I'm Diana Plata. Brings us the latest on this one-of-its-kind case in New York.
Local people are charged with opening graves, body stealing, and illegal dissection. Relatives of the deceased are outraged.
Probably the most hideous, horrible crime of the last 100 years.
Evil people with absolutely no conscience whatsoever.
Lawsuits were filed all over the country in a multi-million-dollar scheme that prosecutors call medical terrorism.
William Sherman, I'm 62. I'm a reporter for the New York Daily News. Well, my connection to the body parts case is I broke the story. I was having a drink or a couple of drinks with an attorney who's a friend of mine, and he said, I know you're not going to believe this, but there's a funeral home in Brooklyn where the owner, along with another guy, has been cutting up corpses and taking the bone and the tissue, putting it in a refrigerator and selling it to 3 publicly owned companies. It was a story that wrote itself, and it was a kind of an Edgar Allan Poe, horrific, repelling, curious horror story that involved real people with some tragic consequences.
My name is Michael Mastromarino. I would describe myself as a quadruple A personality that's driven. Back in '01, I opened up Biotissue Technologies and Biomedical Tissue Services. Tissue banking is, in essence, an industry where they recover tissues, bone, skin, tendon, from someone after they die.
My name is Lee Crusetta. I'm 37 years old, and I'm a licensed practical nurse and also a certified tissue bank specialist. I was referred to Michael Mastromarino by my former director in the operating room. She told me he was a great person, an entrepreneur, and she told me he was starting a tissue bank at the time.
Lee had a great amount of experience working with another tissue bank. He was a nurse, he was in orthopedic surgery, knew sterilization technique, knew recoveries very well, knew his anatomy very well.
I took pride in recovering tissue, something that it was my calling.
Most people know of heart, kidney donation, that's organs. And then there's a tissue side of it where there's bone, tendon, and skin.
One donor can help up to 80 people.
When I first started the company, I wouldn't describe it as daunting. I actually looked at it as a challenge. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed trying to grow something and helping people. We were providing, you understand something, these tissues that we were providing weren't saving lives, they were enhancing lives. All the tissues are used in hospitals for various procedures. So there's a real need for these tissues.
Michael was a very ambitious person. Yeah, you know, I looked up to him in many different ways. He was, you know, eventually he became sort of like the big brother that everybody wants, you know, just smart, had money. He was one of the first people to start a non-hospital-based tissue bank in New York.
You know, the funeral industry had to have a great deal of access to families. This was my thought, was, you know, getting to the families and talking to the families right at the funeral home. So I met up with a funeral director in Brooklyn, and he was all for it.
A tissue bank at a funeral homes, it was an area that was pretty much untapped in New York. And I figured, you know, he was going to come up with a pretty good niche, a pretty good market. And I just figured that, you know, we were going to do well.
My name is Josh Hanshaft. I'm an assistant district attorney in Kings County or Brooklyn, New York. My position is I'm a bureau chief of the Rackets Division. It's the best division in the office. On a simplistic level, it's playing cops and robbers every day. When a case comes in, whoever happens to be on that day gives it kind of a screening. And that's what happened in this day. A police officer came in with said, I have a complaining witness with me or a victim that wants to speak to you about something that's going on in her funeral home. They had purchased Daniel George Funeral Home, and they came in to tell us a few things that were going on there. They were more interested in some finances that weren't being handled properly, but during the conversation, she happened to explain to me that there's a bone program going on upstairs in this secret room. Well, that kind of got my attention just from an incredible story perspective, thinking that it's probably not true, but tell me. So she proceeded to tell about this, they would bring bodies in, and this doctor would come and take bodies out and go out the back door. And I think she called him Dr. Mike, if I remember, and a lot of people called him Dr. Mike. We spoke with some of the people in the neighborhood, and they said there was always activity going in and out the back door. There just seemed to be a lot of activity going on for a funeral home.
My name is Anthony DeMaine. I am the son of Thomas DeMaine. I live in Brooklyn, New York, a place called Garrison Beach. I was born in Coney Island, Brooklyn, and I do construction for a living. My father was being treated at the VA hospital in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, New York. He had bladder cancer. I guess his body just had enough. And just watching his last breath just took a lot out of me. Well, you know what? I knew he was in a better place. At least I thought that's where he was going, was a better place. The next day, I went to the Daniel George Funeral Parlor, that's on Bath Avenue, to go make arrangements for my father to be laid out. The owner of the establishment kind of made everything go smoothly, made me feel good, and comforted me. I actually picked out a wood-type coffin because my father, being that he was a carpenter and things like that, loved wood. I didn't want to go with the aluminum because it kind of was like cold and just there was no warmth to it. And picking out a coffin for your father is not something that you want to do. There was a lot of things that I wanted to stipulate too, as far as that I did not want to have my father embalmed. I just really wanted him to be at peace. I didn't want him touched. I didn't want him having, just didn't want his body touched anymore. He's just had enough.
Tissue banking is legal throughout the United States, as long as there's consent from the legal next of kin.
How everything operated at Daniel George, we built a room upstairs, right above the embalming room, to do the recoveries.
In this room, there was a lift. It was right by the alley where they would bring in all the bodies.
The procedures that we were doing, that cadaver or patient, I still called it a patient, was prepped and draped like it was in an operating room. Patient's lying on a table, in a supine position, meaning on its back. And there are certain tissues that are going to be recovered. Incisions are made in certain areas of the body, and certain tissue types are removed.
We recovered patella tendons, Achilles tendons.
The femur, the fib tib, tibia, the fibula.
The humerus and the radius ulmus. We also did hemipelvises.
We put the tissue on ice, and then the tissues would then go back to our lab, and And then from our lab, they would be sent to these processing facilities. They would be processed, sterilized, and then go to distribution centers, and from distribution centers, go to hospitals. And then ultimately, the patient gets the allograft.
My name is Dana Ryan. In 2003, my family and I were living in Ohio, and I was working for a private Catholic university. The medical problems started in 2001. Unfortunately, my back had progressed so badly. We had the MRI and various other tests, and it confirmed it was a herniated disc, and it was quite bad. Apparently, the disc had compressed down so much that it was bone against bone. And the recommendation was that it be built back up and packed with various bone, including from my own right hip, as well as cadaver bone. And I recall very well when he used the word cadaver bone, I thought, ugh.
My name is Tom Ryan. Dana Ryan is my wife. She'd had finally decided to go see a surgeon, and that's when he had recommended that she have the fusion.
I actually received 2 separate pieces of tissue, bone, from 2 separate cadavers. This was used to fuse my lower spine.
When Dana woke up in the hospital after the surgery, and I'd asked her how she was feeling, and she had told me that it was the first time that she could feel warmth in her foot.
My toes were warm, and I noticed that. And when you've been in pain, or your circulation or what have you compromised for a while, it's a gradual process, and you really don't realize how bad it had gotten.
She was really surprised and pleased with the results at that time, because it seemed to have done her a lot of good.
After my father had passed on, his funeral was at the Daniel George Funeral Parlor on Bath Avenue. All the family was there and things like that. But I guess you always want more people there. But it was nice though. He had plenty of beautiful flowers. So people definitely did care about him. The open casket was fine. When I was looking at him, he actually did look at peace. I thought he could finally rest.
When you look at the whole body as the whole industry, the body's probably worth about $200,000. Yeah, about $200,000 on the open market, everything being given between organ and tissue donation.
It's a billion-dollar industry.
It's like any other business model. When you have a very high demand and a very short supply, prices tend to be are up there.
I don't think anybody appears to be a criminal. I mean, very few people do you look at and go, they're a criminal. Michael Massimino is the dentist who was kind of defrocked of his dentistry. He lost his license due to some trouble he got in with drugs, which left him penniless, and he needed a new way to find money, and that led him directly to this kind of industry.
Well, the specialty I was in was oral maxillofacial surgery, which is a subspecialty in dentistry. I had a practice on Madison Avenue, had a practice in Rockland County, had a practice in Inglewood Cliffs, opened up MRI centers, I opened up trauma centers. From '92 to 2000, I just worked and worked. I was a workaholic, to say the least. Nothing can take me down, I gotta go to work. But it did. I remember it vividly. I was in my office. It was 8:30 at night. You know, I've been working 13, 14 hours, and my back was killing me, and I self-medicated myself, you know. Put a needle in my arm and gave myself some Demerol. The second I put that in, you know, my back felt great, but my body loved it too. It's like, wow, you finally could relax. And it was the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. It became a problem, and I surrendered my license. And one thing kind of led into another. And if that didn't happen, tissue banking wouldn't have happened. So. We started in Brooklyn at the famous Daniel George Funeral Home, and you know, we started with nothing, and we grew into a premier recovery tissue bank. You know, as a recovery agency, we had contracts with processing companies. So we would send RTI specific tissues, and we would send LifeCell specific tissues. We'd send Tutagen, the other company, specific tissues. And these are all Wall Street companies. As we were growing the company, our infrastructure was growing. We reached out to other funeral directors in the boroughs, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Bronx, and then we expanded to New Jersey. We just progressed along, getting the tissues that Regeneration Technologies wanted. You know, they were like, we need more, we want more, we need more. Supply and demand. You know, the funeral directors I was working with, we were able to get more donors.
My name is Michael Vecchione, and I am Chief of the Rackets Division in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. As I was sitting right here in my office, Josh came in and he sat down and he said, look, I have something, I'm not really sure about what this is, but let me tell you a little bit about it. And they told me about an owner of a funeral home who had come in and who had just purchased a funeral home. Turns out to be the Daniel George Funeral Home. In her kind of tour of the funeral home, she had gone up to the embalming room, which we later called the cutting room, and she saw that there was a body being worked on.
She mentioned that they were replacing the bones with pipes. So that's really what kind of stood in my head of going, well, this is weird, strange, and probably not possible, but you know, when I get to it, I'll check it out. She mentioned that she found FedEx receipts from the old owner, and that they were sending these bones to a place called RTI. I went on the computer and wrote RTI bone. What popped up was Regeneration Technologies Institute, which was located down in Florida. And bingo, that was the company I needed. So in August of 2005, I subpoenaed documents from RTI, you know, with the hopes of finding something from those documents. And at about the same time, I received some documents from Daniel George Funeral Home. So now I start to, you know, pour through the documents that, you know, we have. We started to realize there were many companies, and there were many funeral homes and many bodies. And I hit a point where I realized this case is getting bigger than myself, that I need some help, and I went for the best.
My name's Trish McNeil. I'm a bureau chief in the Kings County District Attorney's Office Rackets Division. I was co-counsel with Josh Hanshaft in investigating the case. We had many, many, many documents. We had rooms full of documents. And at that point, I didn't really know what was going on. I couldn't believe it. They had this special room where they were dissecting bodies and taking the bones and the tissue from the bodies, and I didn't know what they were doing with them. I knew that they were giving them to processing companies for use in transplant, but I couldn't imagine whether or not this was something that could be done, couldn't be done.
When I was first subpoenaed, was it a shock? Yeah, I was absolutely concerned that I was being subpoenaed. That day I called my lawyer.
My name is Mario Gallucci. I am a criminal defense attorney, and I represented Michael Mastromarino in his criminal cases. He came into my office with the subpoena. I sat down and I read the subpoena. It was from the Kings County or Brooklyn, New York District Attorney's Office, and I didn't understand what they were looking for, because I personally I was never aware of the tissue harvesting business. So I said to Michael, my initial reaction is, what are you doing? You could do this? This sounds like something that's out of a Frankenstein movie. To be quite honest with you, I felt the same way that everybody else felt when they first heard about it. And then he explained to me that, yes, it's done every day. This is a legal business. And then I began to do my own research on the industry. So that was my first meeting with Michael.
That's standard practice in the tissue recovery industry. Matter of fact, the PVC pipe that we used came from the company that we sent the bone to.
We did that to reconstruct the body so that they could be viewed.
Like any case, if you don't know it, you have to educate yourself. So if it's a medical case, you need to speak to a medical doctor. If it's a bone case, you need to speak to the people who process bones. I originally was looking at this replacing bones with pipe that I caught onto and hung onto, and then I learned that it was legal. So it became like, well, I didn't know that, but let me take a look at it. It's been documented that you cannot pay for bone. You can't buy bone. So what they call it is paying for a recovery fee. The companies that process bones pay for the service of recovering that bone. Sure enough, I just happened to be looking through documents to understand what was in those boxes. I looked at two documents that supposedly should have had the same person's signature on it, and they were two different signatures.
The paperwork on its face made sense. It looked like there were family members who signed, who gave consent, that there was proper signatures, there was proper information. But once you looked behind it, it absolutely made no sense.
So one document was when a person goes to a funeral home and they say, I would like flowers, and I would like a casket, and I would like my loved one to be buried in this style, they sign that document. It's called a funeral contract. When you donate your bones, there's something called a consent form, and the consent form also has a place for your signature. And those two signatures, which should have been the same person, were two different handwritings. And that kind of set the alarm off that something's going on here. You may be allowed to put in pipe, but we have somebody forging somebody's signature. The interesting part about being in rackets is that since you're doing a case proactively before the arrest takes place, you almost kind of see the headline that's going to be coming out. So you may not know whether it's ghoul or body snatcher or what's going to happen, but you kind of know that this is a story that's going to be, once a reporter finds out, it's going to be on the front page.
When I started to look into it and I started to get how big a story this was, how many bodies were involved, and the fact that funeral home directors throughout the city and upstate and in Pennsylvania were being paid $1,000 per corpse to give Master Marino the bodies, I mean, it just began to get bigger and bigger and more interesting.
William Sherman had called me and wanted to ask me questions about the Master Marino case, but at that point there was no Master Marino case. As far as I knew, he answered the subpoena. It was a done case, and here comes this reporter who I had never heard of before, asking me questions about it, so I kind of dismissed him. And then I got the headline, and it woke all of us up.
It was October 7th, 2005, and the headline read, Bodysnatchers of New York, exclusive. And that packed a tremendous wallop.
I crashed my car. I got a call from Michael Mastromarino that morning. I couldn't even understand him. He was so riled up that I'm talking to him and I wasn't paying any attention, and I backed my car right into another car. Did you see the newspaper? My friends are running all over the city buying every single daily news there is. I got about 20,000. He had 20,000 copies, at least, of the daily news in his garage.
Oh yes, sold a tremendous amount of papers.
That was the first of many front page articles on this case.
It was a monster story.
This sounds like something from a horror film. Bodies that were supposed to be prepared for burial or cremation were cut open. Bones were illegally removed from bodies and often replaced with PVC pipe so families wouldn't notice.
I can go up there and describe exactly what I did, and the media can go up there and describe what I did, and it'll be two different stories, with ghouls and chopping up bodies and limbs all over the place, and they made it sound like we desecrated their loved ones.
I was upset. The last thing I want is for my family or my friends to think of me in that way. That's not who I am.
All the work for the past 20 years in the medical dental profession, and to have my name disgraced, my family disgraced, it hurts. It certainly does. Actually, I never heard of that word until this story broke about being a ghoul. I'm not a ghoul, nor is my staff. It's crazy that all this happened. It's just, God. Just can't believe this is my life. You know, when you stand back, you think about everything. It's like, wow. Excuse me. John, you got a napkin or something, please? You know, my kids, I think of my children. Guess I really am a good person, man. Jesus.
Cadavers were secretly cut up in an international stolen body parts ring.
Master Marino, a New Jersey dentist, is accused of running a body parts ring out of a Brooklyn funeral
Sounds
home.
like something from a horror film.
Now in a twisted tale of body snatching for profit.
Details of this case are particularly gruesome. This is like a real-life invasion of the body snatchers.
What they did was so appalling that I consider them like, I mean, they're devils.
Michael was very upset by the headlines. He couldn't understand why people were against him, where in his mind, he was making people live better and longer lives by doing what he was doing. Michael Mastromarino had myself and every lawyer in my office completely convinced that everything he was doing was completely legal. Now, mind you, I don't always take what my clients tell me to be truthful. I went and did my own research, and what we learned is that, yes, what Michael Mastromarino was doing was legal. I truly believe that the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office had no idea what was going on, and that we could march in there and explain to them that they have good intentions of protecting society, but they're wrong, that this is something that will better society.
At one point, Michael Mastromarino and his lawyer said that they were going to come in and speak with me, which, as an investigative attorney, many people do, so you want to hear what their story is.
We sat down with, I believe it was Josh, Trish, and Michael told them his story.
The funeral director was supposed to get the consent. In doing the cases, there wasn't one time Lee or Chris, myself, or any other staff would walk into a funeral home without asking permission from the funeral director. Do we have permission to come in and take the tissue? Did you talk to the family? Yes, we did. Okay, we're coming. That's how every case went, every case. Now, one case was different.
That first meeting, he was in complete denial and I had no idea what was happening. So I listened to his story, I let him get up, I let him walk out, knowing that at some later time we'd have a future meeting about what really went on. Michael had a way of, like everybody else said, of being able to look you in the eye and telling you a story and looking like he believed it. Was it cocky? A little bit, but it was more him just staring me in the eye, trying to make me believe this ridiculous story.
Even when you knew something was wrong in your heart and in your gut, he always found a way to justify it to you, and that's just the way he was. He's the type of guy that can tell you, that the rain comes from the ground up, and he'd put it to you in such a way that you'd believe it.
Once I was able to verify that these people probably did not give consent to give over their bones, then we were kind of set up to say, okay, now we can approach families, because I'm pretty sure that what we're claiming probably happened did. So 99.9 said I never gave any permission for anybody to touch my loved one.
Now, I guess you would say, the nightmare really began.
What we were able to determine about Anthony's father, Thomas, was that he was a victim whose bones were taken when he was at Daniel George.
When I sat down with Josh Hanshaft, the assistant DA, they had written documented proof on basically what they had done to my father, as far as that which tissues were taken out, what they did, what tissue companies it went to, and basically the trail of what they did to my father.
The immediate thing I wanted to do was say, we need to verify this by looking at the bodies that were buried.
And they finally asked me if I would exhume my father. Basically, when they exhumed him and they did the autopsy, they basically found that the bones in his body had been taken out and had been replaced with PVC piping. How did I feel about that? I kind of feel like I let my guard down and I didn't protect him. I feel very sad that with the type of life that he lived, that's how he had to go out. And it's like nobody deserves something like that. And I just feel very sorry for him that it's just hard to explain exactly in words. Just felt really sorry for him.
I've been doing this for a very long time. I have never seen a case like this before, and I don't think that I'll ever see a case like this again.
Until I saw that first body being pulled out from underground, being autopsied, and to see the pipes that were now in place of bones, did I really believe that it was going on at all. Even though we had all these allegations and all these things on paper, until I saw it did I really go, wow. And then even the second one, I was still like, can't be more than one, can't be more than two. By the time I got to number 5, I kind of realized there's going to be a lot of people here.
The case was enormous based on the facts, based on what he had done, and based on the depth and breadth of his activity. It turned out to be a very local case in a very little area of Brooklyn, and it turned out to be a worldwide matter.
After we'd gathered all the documents, and after we had kind of laid everybody out, it looked like, it appeared as if 1,000 corpses were invaded.
My name is Susan Cook Kittredge, and I live in Shelburne, Vermont in the United States, and I am a minister. My father was Alistair Cook, and his body was stolen by Mastro Marino and chopped up and sold.
Well, Alistair Cook was actually sitting in the files for a while before I happened to look closer at the name, and something rang a bell that Alistair Cook's name was something of a television name or a name that was one that people knew.
We had sprinkled his ashes, or what we at the time believed to be his ashes, in Central Park just 5 days after he died.
My name is Karen Del Rey and I live in Hazlet, New Jersey. My dad's name was James Thornton Sr. Michael Mastromarino called my father BM04L125. What that code means is biomedical for BM, 04 the year my dad passed away, L for the 12th month of the year, and then 125 is the 125th body they harvested that month.
He's ruined thousands of people's lives. He's ruined family members who are horrified and have nightmares to this day about what happened to their family members.
It's difficult to get through every day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about him and what they did to him. And the hardest thing is now is that I just can't get to any of the good memories.
What Mastro Marino did was to light a flame under my imagination that will never be stilled. And even though it has been years since this happened, and I try and put it out of my mind, when I do revisit it, all I can think of, he died at midnight, so it was dark, and someone stole his body in the middle of the night.
My My father was skinned, and they took 900 square inches of skin, every bone they could, and mutilated him. That breaks my heart.
It almost defies imagining, but I go ahead and I imagine it anyway because I can't help. I haven't seen the reality. I don't know. And it's not that I would want at all to see him without legs, without arms, without a pelvis. But just as I say that, it's so horrific, and I have no way of getting rid of that.
Callousness is incalculable. Family members were almost never told, and because the documents on these tissues were forged, it was often made to appear that the donors were younger and healthier, and that means that some of those people who received tissue could have received tissue that was contaminated.
Relatives of the deceased are outraged.
To take one's body parts and steal them, and they were diseased body parts, to put them into healthy people is unbelievable.
I never gave permission for my father's body to be used, mostly because my dad was not a candidate to be an organ donor. My dad had asbestosis, he had skin cancer, he had a lot of things wrong with him.
I really wouldn't understand why anybody would want to take my father's body parts, being for the fact that he died of cancer, having bladder cancer. Not being a doctor, but I wouldn't think that that would be a smart thing to do.
My father's body was in perhaps the worst possible state for anybody to be used for tissue donation. He was 95 years old. He was very frail. He had lung cancer that had metastasized to his bones. And boy, that would be the last bones I'd want in my body if I needed it.
There were over 1,000 donors, basically. And I would say the vast majority of those, there was something incorrect on those forms. Now we're learning that not only did they steal body parts, but they took body parts from people who weren't healthy. It was a frightening thought to me, especially when I learned that Master Marino and his crew were not doing the proper screening procedures. They were taking tissue from very, very unhealthy people.
After the surgery, I felt fantastic. But from the time I took the back brace off and didn't have that stable support, that's when I really noticed that it was not so good. It was excruciating. I believe the term that the doctors used to describe that was failed back syndrome. I was declared totally and permanently disabled in 2004, in December of 2004.
In my heart, I know that the tissue was good tissue, and if it wasn't, we'd know about it. We would definitely know about it, and that's how my conscience is clear, and that's what I would like to, that's why I wanted to do this, was to get that across. If we weren't doing good work, I'd have to believe the companies we were dealing with would have asked us to stop sending tissue to them. Every piece of tissue that's down at that processing facility gets tested and mechanically tested and cultured. So if there was a problem or an incestual problem with bad bone going down there, within a week we'd have a phone call. Instead, it was just the opposite. What's it gonna take us to get more of your bone because your tissue is phenomenal?
No medical precautions were taken to ensure that these tissue transplants were free from disease or defect. The Federal Drug Administration has notified hospitals, alerting them to the possibility that diseased tissues may have been used in transplants.
Dear Dana, I'm writing this letter to make you aware of information that was recently provided to me by the Federal Food and Drug Administration. Unfortunately, it seems that the company that provided the donor bone cannot document the attainment of proper consent and screening for the bone from the donor or the family of the donor. The FDA and CDC recommend that you be offered access to appropriate infectious disease testing. The testing would include a test for HIV, hepatitis and syphilis. I remember getting that letter like it was yesterday. And I was reading it, and it was just, I couldn't even comprehend what I was reading.
Michael Mastromarino, Chris Alderossi, Lee Crescetta, and Joseph Naselli were set to turn themselves in the end of February of 2006. And they did, and sure enough, they came in and they were arraigned in Supreme Court in Brooklyn. They came in, there was cameras everywhere, there was, family members who were irate. It was a very tense day, but it was also a good day from the point of view of saying, we've indicted them and now they're going to face charges.
Well, I turned myself in. I didn't get arrested. I turned myself in with my attorney 10 o'clock at night, and walked into the DA's office in Brooklyn, and I stayed there overnight. And then, they had the parade of me walking into court with them hand in hand around me, so they were all on TV, and it was their big day, and they had the press conference that holding up the PVC pipe saying, look what he did. And it enraged the public. And again, lack of knowledge of what really transpires in a tissue recovery agency. How we recover is no different than how anybody else recovers.
He was public enemy number one. I never had a client that had the volume of charges on crimes that you had never seen before.
The indictment consisted of 122 counts.
Grave robbery.
Unlawful dissection of a human being.
Body stealing.
Opening graves.
Forgery, falsification of business records.
Reckless endangerment in the first degree, reckless endangerment in the second degree, and scheme to defraud in the first degree.
The district attorney's office, in looking at that indictment, was extremely creative.
The most serious charge faced was called enterprise corruption.
That charge alone could get him 25 years in jail, let alone all the other counts. They were using an enterprise corruption, which you typically see in a bookmaking case, in a loan sharking case, mobsters. You don't see it in a tissue harvesting business that is intertwined with multinational corporations that are traded on the stock exchange.
I was kind of a blur. I knew I was in trouble. And I kept telling myself, it was inconceivable. In enterprise corruption, never even heard of that charge until I was in court.
4 men accused of stealing bones from corpses and selling them to be used in transplants pleaded not guilty late today.
Bail has been set for the 4 defendants, with Mastromarino's the highest at $1.5 million. Their passports have also been revoked for fear they are a flight risk.
The battle lines were drawn today, and we expect to fight.
They were very confident that they were going to beat the case, and their attorneys repeatedly told us that we didn't have a strong case and that we wouldn't be able to prove it.
He kept telling me that everything was going to be fine, that they had no evidence. He felt that he could just blame it on the funeral directors and walk away from this.
Michael pled innocence up until the day I saw something that I had not seen before.
Two weeks before Christmas in 2006, I got the test results back. The test that I had was for HIV 1 and 2, syphilis, and hepatitis B and C. Shock. I don't even think I had a reaction at that time. In front of the doctor, I didn't cry. I was just really, really shocked. Once I got out to the car, that's a different story. I didn't think I would be able to drive home. I was crying so hard. I had been exposed to hepatitis B. It's an inflammation of the liver. It's very serious. Sometimes, I understand, sometimes fatal. My husband and my oldest son had to go for testing for hepatitis B. You never get those tests back quickly enough. your mind goes crazy, but our son was just fine. He was negative, and my husband's test results came back that he was negative for all diseases. When I went to see my family doctor, who delivered all 3 of my children, he's been my family doctor for 22 years, and he told me then, I tested you when you were pregnant with the kids, and you were negative. 3 kids, 3 negative tests. You have 1 surgery where you actually receive blood or blood products, and now all of a sudden you are positive for Hep B.
We were moving forward towards preparing for trial and seeing how we were going to present this much information, these many thousand pages of documents to a jury, and we were educating ourselves every day to find other ways to prove our case and make sure that it was strong.
I never understood what their smoking gun was until much later in the case. But eventually the smoking gun was DNA information.
Initially we were puzzled on how this tainted tissue could get past the health checks. The processors did keep some of the tissue that was sent to them. So at that point, we basically sought out the assistant of our medical examiner's office in New York City, and they were wonderful in helping us conduct all the DNA testing.
In order to send tissue to a processor, the processor needs to do an evaluation on the tissue itself. So the first thing that you send to the processor is a sample of blood. The processor then processes the sample of blood, determines whether or not the person has a disease such as syphilis, hepatitis, AIDS, what have you, and then they call up Michael and they say, the blood is good, the blood is diseased, I don't want the tissue. What was happening was the blood DNA didn't match the tissue DNA, and that none of this was matching.
They had extra vials of blood. It was in that bag. They would pull one out when necessary. They knew it was already checked and clean and acceptable to the processing companies, and so they called it, they deemed it the okay bag.
And they were sending down tissue that they had no idea on whether the tissue was taken from somebody who died from hepatitis or AIDS or syphilis or any one of those diseases. I met up with Michael and I presented to him the DNA. And I said, Mike, what is this? Don't worry about it. No, we gotta worry about it. What are you talking about? What is it? You gotta explain this to me. No, that's nothing. That's made up. The processes, you know these processes, they want to put this all on me. They're doing everything wrong. This is their way of putting it all on me. I didn't believe him. And I knew at that point that he was lying to me.
In hindsight, looking back, should have just went in and said, yeah, you know, I did this, I did A, B, and C, but I didn't. I did not tell my lawyer. You know, my lawyer was under a different presumption, as the DA knew I was lying, but I don't believe my lawyer knew I was lying, and I regret not telling him from the start. The truth always comes out.
It was over. The wagons had completely surrounded us.
I had to face what I had done. I do admit to signing consent forms and forging other documents. You know, like I said, I made a lot of bad choices and just trusted the wrong person. And you know, if I could go back and listen to my instincts again, like I said, I know I wouldn't be here. I regret the day I met Michael, and I regret doing everything that I've done to hurt other people, and the pain that I've caused my family. I didn't want to think about the families of the donors. That was another way for me to rationalize things to myself. If I sat there and tried, I couldn't have did it.
Master Marino changed his plea to guilty when I guess he realized there was nowhere for him to run. He realized that we had done our homework and we had him. So I think that's what pushed him. But he took us right up to the very end, literally pretty much on the eve of trial is when he decided to plead.
Why did I decide to plead guilty in the end? I decided to plead guilty because I was guilty. And we were going to go to trial, and I had enough. It was a tough 2 years. It was a tough 2 years, and I lied to my family too. I lied where I didn't even tell them that I was forging paperwork. I'm sure they assumed things were happening, but I was tired. I was done. Yes, there was a crime. Forgery was done. Cases were taken without consent, but my intention was never to hurt anyone, knowing that the tissue was going to be sterilized and irradiated, and all possible transmissible diseases would be dead. I was comfortable with that.
Michael's achievement, his ambition, sometimes blinded him. He sets out to do things to help people, and then his ambition gets the best of him, especially in this case, where he got so driven that he believed he was smarter than everybody else, and that there were a lot of regulations and rules that were put into place that Michael believed were unnecessary.
He claimed that basically, you know, it wouldn't hurt anybody if we did a body that was, you know, 28 or 29 hours, or someone that was 90 when the age limit was, you know, 80.
Did I take the best medical social history? No. Was that paperwork forged? Yes. Now, did an HIV case come along? I don't know. But I can tell you that in the sterilization process and the processing techniques that these companies use, it irradiates everything anyway. Hepatitis, syphilis, HIV, you know, now this thing with cancer, well, it was the bone had cancer, the patient died of cancer, so the bone has cancer, so now the recipient has cancer. That's just not true. But, you know, these are where I have problems with the industry, and the so-called smart guys make up these rules, and I'd like to sit down with these smart people and talk about them.
My name's John Healy. I'm a physician and orthopedic surgeon and a professor of orthopedics at Cornell University Medical School in New York, and the chief of orthopedics at Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City.
Dr. Healy was the expert that basically said, by what Michael Mastromarino did and the types of tissues that he took, put the transplant recipients in harm's way.
Bone that is osteoporotic or that has had cancer or other disease, it's not as strong, it's not going to stand up long enough, it doesn't heal as well, there's not the same surface area to heal. And so that's a serious problem. The HIV testing, for example, was not conducted in the standard way. These donors could have been infected and the processing not been sufficient to cleanse that bone and make it safe for transplantation. Several of them actually had cancer.
Cancer to cancer, again, let's go back to cancer. And we spoke about this earlier. Unless it was a multiple myeloma, lymphoma, leukemia, breast cancer doesn't affect the bone. Brain cancer doesn't affect the bone. Lung cancer, not unless it's metastatic cancer, there is no infection in the bone.
However, the cancer will have eroded that bone, it will have weakened that bone. The treatment that the patient has received for that cancer will have compromised the tissue in a variety of ways. And I can just speak as a person, not as a doctor, but I wouldn't want to receive that bone myself. And so just on that gut level, it fails.
Hepatitis B is not an easy disease to catch. It involves an exchange of bodily fluids. And I can assure everyone that the only bodily fluids I've exchanged is with my husband of 18 years. Never received blood or blood products. never worked in the healthcare field, have never used drugs, never had any kind of behavior that would put me at risk. The only thing that has been introduced into my body was this bone.
If someone were to get sick from the tissue, yes, I would feel horrible. I mean, I wanted to help people. I dedicated my life to it.
Master Marino pleaded guilty and barged to dozens of felony counts, including corruption and grand larceny. Prosecutors say he made about $5 million by looting bodies from funeral homes.
Master Marino sat in a Brooklyn courtroom Thursday as family members of his victims and those who received transplants had their say before the judge who will sentence him.
My name is Anthony DeMaine. My father was Thomas DeMaine. Did you think you were helping my father when you cut his body into thousands of pieces so that you could sell them for your own greedy plan? You are a butcher of lifeless bodies and deserve to spend every day in the jail cell. Only then will justice be served. Happy Father's Day, Dad.
When the time came to give my victim's impact statement, I stood there and just made a fool of myself crying, but I said everything that I wanted to say.
It was very emotional. I think that, many people in the court held back tears.
There are nights that I have nightmares seeing my dad in his dismembered state. In essence, our realities have become our one with our nightmares.
Yeah, I remember. I'll never forget their statements.
I'd just like to take this opportunity to apologize for the pain and grief I've caused all the donor families and donor recipients. I'm truly sorry for all the pain I've caused you. I'd also like to apologize to my family for all the pain I've caused them through this tumultuous 3 years. I'm truly, truly sorry from the deepest parts of my heart. May God have mercy on my soul. Thank you.
Just the first time I saw Master Marino, I guess there was definitely some hatred at the time because I definitely had hate flowing through my veins. I definitely did. But I just more so felt sorry for him. It really did. It's like, you know what? People can do anything in life, and that's what you chose to do. I don't understand that.
The judge imposed sentence, and he sentenced him to 18 to 54 years in jail.
The sentence is a harsh, harsh sentence.
Oh, I think Master Marino's sentence was much lighter than mine. Mine is life. At least he gets a chance to go up for parole.
This entire enterprise, this entire affair was motivated by greed, pure and simple. Master Marino was motivated by greed because he made millions. His two assistants made a couple $100,000 a year. The funeral directors who sold the bodies to Master Marino for $1,000 each, and no labor involved, just take the body, here's $1,000. I mean, there's greed. And the publicly traded companies that bought this material from Master Marino with few questions asked, and we sold it to hospitals and people in need of this transplant material, that was greed also.
It's all about greed. This whole case was about greed. I mean, I would say most of the cases we do somehow come down to money, and this was no different. He took something that, again, was a good thing for our society, a noble thing, and all he saw was dollar signs.
Yeah, of course money plays a part in it. Of course, families, everybody was doing well. These companies are doing well. They're Wall Street companies. I mean, the day I got indicted, they stopped trading on the stock market. I mean, if that doesn't show you some influence, I mean, I don't know what does.
Michael Master Marino, crook and scum though he is a cog in the wheel.
Is an engine that was running, and bone was the fuel, and everybody wanted it. And the industry, as far as the industry goes, and that's the truth, and I was a part of that.